Hello, you beautiful souls. Welcome to Harness the Shift podcast. This is a space where we explore personal transformation, conscious leadership, and the journeys of people who are doing the inner work and bringing that awareness into how they live, lead, and serve. I am your host, Jay. All right, let's see who's joining us today.
Front, and they literally said to me, "Show me your papers." I was shocked. I was literally like, what papers? What are you talking about? We need to see your proof that you're vaccinated. I said, well, I'm not. And they said to me, this was hilarious.
Wow.
The musical happened to be Annie. I don't like any musical enough to inject myself with untested drugs, let alone Annie. I was only here to see my friends. You really think I'm going to take an untested drug so I can sit by myself to see a musical I don't even like?
Welcome to Harness the Shift. It's Jay, and I'm your host. On today's episode, I'm talking with Laura Vosika, a writer, poet, musician, and host of Books Brews podcast. She's also the author of the Blue Bells Chronicle, a time travel series set across modern and medieval Scotland, known for its historical depth and rich storytelling. Laura is the mother of 10 children and lives in the Appalachians, where she raises animals and continues to create, write, and share her work. Today, we're diving into her journey, her creative path, and what shapes the stories she brings to the world. So let's get into it. Hello, you beautiful souls. Welcome to Harness the Shift again. And we are still here. Amen. Today I'm joined by Laura Vosika from the Appalachian Mountains of Tennessee. And you have a farm there in the Appalachians.
Yes.
And that's where you're running the show from. I'm loving it.
Right. So normally I have my tavern behind me, but today I thought I'd bring my sheep. So this is Ramses. He is the St. Croix. Yep. And when he's groomed, which he never is because he won't let us near him, he's absolutely beautiful. He's looking a little dirty in that picture, but he's a nice ram.
I got a barker over here.
I can hear him.
And I'm just like, okay. I mean, there's nothing I can do about it. Archie, please. Like, he's over on the other side of the room, and I'm like, will you please? These dogs, I swear he has a mind of his own. Anywho, sorry. Didn't mean to interrupt. Sorry about that. So you were talking about this is
our St. Croix ram here. And what we have that we didn't even know, to put this in context, my husband and I both lived very, very suburban lives up until September of 2021. And at that point, we moved to acreage in Duluth, Minnesota. Winter came, so we really continued a fairly suburban lifestyle until the spring of 2022. And at that point, I had never grown a head of lettuce successfully. I had never really handled any animal other than cats and dogs. And so it's been a huge, huge change of life for us as we have learned to plant. I'm currently putting up blog posts about how to improve the soil without using fertilizer, commercial chemical fertilizer. I'm learning an awful lot about planting. Things like sometimes you have to scarify the seed, which means you put it in the fridge or the freezer to simulate being in the ground over winter. And some seeds, things I never knew. I thought you just stuck a seed in the ground and water.
That makes so much sense.
Yep. And I'm learning things like some seeds need to be soaked in water first. Some plants need to be grown from cuttings. And to some people, this may sound very basic. But to those who have never grown anything, you start to learn there's a whole lot more to it. And so we started, once I figured out I could keep a head of lettuce alive, we added chickens, and that was kind of scary. When you start reading on the internet how to take care of chickens, they make it seem like you need a PhD. They're talking about how you have to thoroughly clean the coop every single week with vinegar, and you need to check the little chicks' little butts for this, that, and the other and clean them. And
yeah.
oh my gosh, how does anyone keep these things alive? Well, I found out it's really not that hard. So then we added rabbits, and so we raised New Zealand whites, which are the most popular meat rabbit in the United States.
Wow.
Yep. So right now we have about a dozen, and hopefully we have 3 does pregnant. And so I was talking to you a little before the program about our current farmhand, Marshall, who just looks at things and says, here's how to improve it. So he has been hammering away down there. He's building a set of 3 larger runs that each of the does can be in, because some of them don't necessarily like to take good care of their babies if they're in a cage. One in particular we found out. And they do much better if they're in a much bigger sort of run. And so he's built these 3 sections, and you can lift the doors up in between. There will be a buck in the middle, a doe on either side. And when we want to breed, now instead of chasing them around their cage because they don't like being caught, we lift up the door, scoot her in, and they can do whatever they want, and then we just scoot her back into her own side. So, and then when we got to Tennessee, my son drove 15 rabbits in the back of his truck with the tractor on a flatbed behind him. And we got to Tennessee and we added the sheep, and we learned that there are such a thing as hair sheep. And what that means is they don't produce wool, and so they don't need to be sheared. And so if you're just starting out with sheep, it's highly recommended that you start off with the hair sheep, because it's just one less thing that you have to deal with and have to learn.
Yeah.
And so I think you can maybe see the cows in the background. Those are actually the neighbors' cows. And so they have, I'm thinking, maybe about 100 acres, and the cows make a circuit every couple of weeks, and they'll show up right next to our fence, and they and the sheep and the dogs talk to each other and so on. So it's fun.
Now, you were talking about that are you near Jonestown? Or
I don't think I'm near Jonestown.
Johnson City? Is it all up in the corner of the state?
Yes, we're about an hour and a half drive from Johnson City, I think.
Oh, gosh, okay, great. So you're right in the corner.
Right, yeah. And in fact, we're near... Cool. Yeah, we're near the famous Cumberland Gap, where I believe it was Daniel Boone started taking all the pioneers over the mountains. And so I've actually hiked up to the actual Cumberland Gap about 3 times now.
So cool.
Mm-hmm.
So you've been on parts of the Appalachian Trail?
You know, I don't really know. I think what I've been on is not technically the Appalachian Trail. It's called the Wilderness Trail, and I don't know if they run together or not. I'm not really into hiking. So usually, you know, we'll do that if my husband and I both have a free day, which doesn't happen often. If my sons come to visit, they like to get out. So then we might hike up there. If friends come to visit me, it's always a fun thing to do. But as far as knowing the actual trail I'm on, I only know it's the Wilderness Trail.
Wow. This is amazing.
It's a neat piece of history.
Yeah. So this transition, like from going to suburbia to now homesteading and learning all of this information and integrating that, I mean, what a transition that you've gone through.
Right.
It's
been really, some parts of it are not necessarily fun. For instance, I'll get into why we did it. Homesteading is actually exploding since 2020, and I think the reason is obvious.
Yes.
That we're not the only ones who are thinking this way.
Right.
That in 2020, as of the end of March, right about this time, 5 years ago, all of a sudden, I had kids sent home from high school, sent home from college, and all of a sudden, 6 of my 9 kids were back in the house full time, and we couldn't get toilet paper. Now, that's a little bit of a stretch to say, because, in fact, several of my sons worked at Walmart and grocery stores and things, so they were able to tell me when it came in, and we would go buy a jumbo pack or 2. So we never ran out, but there was always that fear.
Yeah.
And more important than toilet paper, I mean, you can find workarounds if you need to. I'll keep it clean. But the bigger fear is next time it's going to be food. Because everybody in this country, probably everybody in the world, saw how quickly, with a snap of the finger, the government can enact policies that determine what you will find on the shelves and what you won't. And so my husband and I are both, he's got, I forget how many degrees, up to a PhD. I have a master's degree. I've taught myself to play about close to a dozen instruments over the years. One thing we're good at is learning. And so we said, next time it's going to be food, we better start learning now. And my feeling is, I'm sure there are people who say, oh, that's, cataclysmic thinking, whatever, and it's not going to happen. What if it doesn't happen? Well, what if it doesn't? I'm having a blast. And I've had friends, maybe only one, but one of my friends at least looked at me with a lot of concern when we started this and said, are you really happy? I'm like, this is my morning commute. Everybody else's morning commute is bumper to bumper traffic and honking and being stuck and the smell of fumes, whatever. In fact, I just posted a picture on my Glen Merrill Facebook page saying this is my morning commute, and the only traffic jam we have here is the sheep and the chickens. And it's wonderful, and it feels right. It feels like the way we were supposed to live. And so, I did start to say there's some things that aren't quite as fun. We have had to learn how to slaughter chickens and got them, and that was not fun. It's hard to take a life. It really is. And it's easy to go to the store and it's packaged neat and clean. Okay, all you did is let somebody else do the hard part. So we're having to face that if we want to be more self-sufficient, at this point we can go buy it at the store, and we often do, but we also have to know how to slaughter them and process them. And so I have learned to do that both with chickens and rabbits, and not fun, but we know we can provide for ourselves. And we have reached the point where on occasion, especially in the summer, we can have a dinner where 95% of it is what we grew ourselves or raised in the garden.
Wow.
And the only thing on that plate that I didn't raise myself is the salt, pepper, and vegetable oil, or olive oil.
What an accomplishment.
Yep. And we've done that in about 4 years' time, starting from spring of 2022.
That's amazing. And then on top of that, you're a writer, you're a musician, a podcast host, and a mother of 10.
Right.
What an extraordinary life.
I have enjoyed it. So, the thing is, to say all of that, I'm not doing it all at once. So what should I start with? I'll start with the podcast, which I am currently doing. So we do the Books and Brews podcast, and this started in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I had a publicist for about 3 years, and this was her idea. And so she called around. She found Minnesota's first beer cicerone, which is the equivalent of a wine sommelier, but in the world of beer. And I kind of joked with
this. Where is this? Where is this?
Beer cicerones can be anywhere. Yeah, you go through a school.
Is it in Minnesota?
Oh, no, it's all over the country, the program to become a beer cicerone.
Okay. Right. I'm sorry. I misunderstood what you said.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I said Minnesota's first beer cicerone, so it was a fairly new program. And so he was the first one to achieve this in the state. And so she tracked him down, found him. He was writing a column for the Minneapolis Star-Tribune. And I kind of teased him at the time. She called him up. This was his story. She called him up and said, "Hi, would you like to do this thing really early in the morning?" Because we were going to be on AM 950 in the Twin Cities at 8 a.m. And I said to him, if someone called me, let alone a stranger, saying, "Do you want to do something really early in the morning?" I would have slammed the phone down. I don't do really early in the morning, but he was up for it. And so we did it together for, I think, about 3 or 4 years, maybe 4. And what we do is we would bring in an author. I would interview them, and they would do 3 readings during the program, and he would pair a beer to their reading the way you would pair beer or wine to a meal or to a course of a meal.
What a cool idea.
It has been so much fun. And so eventually life just changed a lot for him. He wasn't really able to continue with it. And so now my husband is my co-host, and he does cocktails, largely because we didn't want it to seem like we were just replacing Michael, like just, we're just going to keep putting in someone else to do beers. And he really enjoys doing the cocktails and putting kind of his own twist on it. That's what we do. And there is the full podcast with 3 readings that goes up on all the podcast sites. And then I also do, because there are so many authors who I'd love to talk to and would like to be on the program, we do Books and Brews Light. And I do that, anywhere from a couple times a month to twice a week, depending how busy I am. And right now I'm backing off a little bit because summer's coming, spring, planting, all of that. There's a lot to do. But that goes up on YouTube, and that we don't do a drink, and we just do 1 reading.
Wow. I have, I'm over here, I always say parking lot, like your thoughts, so that you get them out of your head onto a piece of paper. And I'm like, oh my God, I gotta let her know about Alex, because Alex has a book, and a couple people that just referrals if you need anybody.
Yeah, I'm always up for good authors, and I have met some really, really interesting people this way.
Yeah, I'm thinking I've got several people. Oh yes, definitely this one too. So I have like 4 people that I'm going to refer you to.
Okay, great.
That's what it's all about, right? Harness the shift, co-collaboration.
Yes.
Basically, like the power of networking. And with co-collaboration, there's like abundance for all, right? Like,
right.
I think one thing that we've learned is that there's a lot of money floating around, ain't there? There's a lot of money that people can be doing very nefarious things with, and utilizing money for, terrible things. And so it's not that money is the root of all evil. It is that the energy around money.
The love of money, the greed. Yep. The willingness to do anything to get that money.
Yeah. Yeah. Truly remarkable times. I'll just say that. Yes. Yeah. I'm telling you, it is. 2020, I think a lot of folks were like, what is going on? And, I never really got into the whole political thing. I always, I said my truth from it, being an independent thinker, being someone who can connect the dots, recognize patterns, and critically think. And so when I'm looking around and I'm like, this does not make any sense to me, and I'm like putting patterns together, it's like, And when the spirit is telling you, because even back then, I've always had that sixth sense, right? That intuition that would just guide me, no matter if I was making a bad choice or not. Like, don't do that, or, look, I literally was like, look, it was like, girl, this is all bullshit. Like, do not fear. If anything, you need to be like, it's time to stand up. And I'm like, what? Where the heck is this coming from?
Right.
And over the course, I'm in New York City, and over the course of like a week that I'm there, like the crowds, like this is New York City, the busiest city in our country. And it's like, there's nowhere, what is going on? Like the crowds were thinning, and I'm like, what's going on here? And it's like, it's kind of like,
so many people were so scared.
Like, what's going on? You're recognizing things.
But my first clue, I think at first I think I didn't really know what to think. I wasn't all in that this is going to kill the world, but we were only a week or yeah, we were only a week or so into it. One of my sons worked at Aldi, which was just not far from us, only a mile. And I would go there either to shop or to drop him off to work. And there are these long lines of people, many of them elderly, standing outside in March because they were only letting whatever it was, 5, 10 people in the store at a time to save their lives from catching COVID. And I looked at that and went, any fool knows that when you make old people stand outside in the snow, in the cold, in the damp, in the rain, in Minnesota in March, a certain number of those people are going to get pneumonia. They are going to get sick from being forced to stand outside. We all know that. And you're telling me you care about their health by forcing them to stand outside in the cold? I'm not buying it. That makes no sense at all. So I concluded early, we are being lied to. And nothing has changed my mind since.
I'm right with you, sister. Yeah, that was a time that, there was a part of me that awakened at that time. That was that, like, the inner lioness, because I knew. And I'm like, you know what? No. You can't tell me to do something and say that it's the law and not know where that law is to enforce me to do it. Show me. Show me right now or get out of my way.
Right. So are you referring
I went at it with folks with the mask because I'm like, I'm not cutting my oxygen supply. I breathe in the breath of God and I am not cutting off of it. That really pissed me off. That piece of the whole thing, I don't know. Maybe in a previous life my air was cut off. I don't know, but that made me literally step into being a warrior. I was like, no. And I was probably, I would say, one of the biggest, out there that were standing up, like one of the biggest assholes. Hey, I was not a nice person. I'm going to flat out say it. I was not nice.
We shouldn't have been. Nice. And I, for the most part, refused to wear a mask. Every once in a while, I would take a scarf I have that's very, very thin, like you can pretty much see through it, kind of drape it across my face, lift it like that to my nose. Nobody ever said anything. Most of the time, if I went somewhere without a mask, they wouldn't say anything. So I had one, I forget what we were down in Tennessee for. We still lived in Minnesota at the time. And we went into a shoe store. They watched me walk around that shoe store for 35 minutes, looking at shoes, trying on shoes without a mask. They watched me stand in line with about 3 or 4 boxes of shoes. They waited till I was next in line to pay. I was about to walk up to pay, and the guard comes up and says, "You have to put on your mask." I said, "No." I put the shoes on the counter and I walked out. Said, "You just lost yourself a couple $100 worth of a sale there. I am not putting on the mask." And I thought, again, here's proof that they don't believe what they're saying, because you let me walk around the store for 35 minutes. You let me stand in line. You waited until I was about to pay to try and force me to do what you wanted because you thought I wanted the shoes that badly. No, I don't. I'm not doing it.
It was all about control, manipulation. It was never about making sense. And even, look, forgive me, creator, but those folks that were in the beginning, like listening to what they were being told, you need to put on a mask. Oh, you need to do this. Oh, you need to do that. Back in the day, I was like, no, you're like, they would have, that basically equates to a brown shirt.
Yes.
When you're doing something because you're being told to do it, and you're causing, you're caught, like, they don't realize the psychological stuff to that. You know what I mean? Like, do you think I enjoyed being a jerk? I didn't enjoy being a jerk. I went home. I got to the point that I became a hermit because I was like, I don't even want to be around it. Because this is insanity. This is literally insanity. It makes no sense. I am not sick. And when I am sick, I rest. I've always been one of those people. If I'm sick, I'm not going to work. And you know, that's the correct thing to do.
Exactly. Well, and when you look to, for instance, in Minnesota, Dr. Scott Jensen was a very outspoken opponent of all that was going on. I think that he's the one who did some measurements and said the size of the virus compared to the holes in your mask is like trying to stop a mosquito from getting into your yard by putting up a chain link fence. He said, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's not stopping anything. And he was hounded. He was politically persecuted. They went after him with lawfare. They really went after him hard. And that was another clue to me. If he's wrong, show us how he's wrong. But going after him, trying to take his license instead of just telling us why he's wrong, that's not a free and open society. That's, as you say, brown shirts in control, who are telling you you are going to follow the narrative or we will destroy you. That's not democracy. It's not a republic.
No, it's not. And God, it's so interesting. I go back to that time and I think to myself of all of the just, wow. I'm like, I don't know. You just took me back when you said that. I'm like thinking back, like I'm just seeing these, like it's coming to me, like these flashback or these like, what is that? Where like just memories all of a sudden flooding of that time. And I'm like, maybe I still have a little bit of, you know, my journey's been involved. It's been about peeling back the shit, right, that I've gone through in my life. But I think a lot of folks there's not that I'm traumatized, but a lot of people are traumatized in a sense from that time because it was so like such a massive psyop. And I talk about this, you know, because I'm fascinated with military intelligence and I'm also fascinated with past lives and past life regressions and things like this. And so I started to remember. It was very strange when I went to Florida. I don't know if I talked about this when we talked.
I don't think so.
I drove to Florida and this was in November and I got like near Pensacola. And so I know that they have some military bases, but then all of a sudden I started getting these memories and it just kept coming to me. And I'm like, I have this fascination with that part. I mean, I served in the Air Force, but the whole military intel. And I remember when I was in the Air Force and I was at San Antonio, God, what is that base? Lackland Air Force Base. And
I think my sister was born there, actually.
I did a little bit of training there and kind of intersected with some people that were in the Defense Languages Institute. And so
my son was there.
Yeah, so just very interesting. I've always had interest in that, and I've always been interested in forensic psychology and abnormal psychology. And so you just sit back and you're like, this seems like super calculated. And you start to like, you know, I'm going to connect this and I'm going to connect that. And it's just then that just led to going down rabbit holes, right? And so I came across this declassification. It's called the gateway process. I don't know if you've ever heard of this.
I don't think so.
So it talks about that we live in a holographic world, and it talks about consciousness in this declass. And I don't want to get too far into it because I mean you could do a whole podcast on it. It's so interesting. But I know that you're an author of time travel books, and that's always been like something that is like such a I've started to go down that rabbit hole, but then I'm like I was more interested in some other ones, but I went down a little bit, and I kind of explain myself as like this jack of all trades person that's researched different conspiracies and stuff. I mean, the conspiracy theorists are winning? What is it like?
100 to 0? Right, something like that.
Like, I mean, I know there are some conspiracy theories out there that haven't been proven yet, but you know, it's.
But one
It's
by one, an
interesting.
awful lot of
It's
them
an
are.
interesting topic. But yeah, that was something that I researched and I'm like, I gotta go a little bit further on that. So talk about your books, because how cool is that?
Well, this is book 3. You can tell by all the tabs. This is kind of my working copy when I need to find things in
The
there.
water is wide.
The water is wide. So I don't happen to have the newest cover. I updated the cover on book 1 and 2, and I don't have physical copies of those. So this is book 3. Book 4 and 5 complete the series. So it was originally called a trilogy. In fact, it was originally just one book. And what happened was, well, let me tell you about this story. It's about Sean Kleiner, who is a professional trombonist with an orchestra. And so, can you hear my clock going off, my musical
Yes,
clock?
it's beautiful.
It's set completely wrong and it thinks it's noon, so maybe I'm in a time warp. I time
Ah,
traveled back to earlier today.
you never know.
Right,
You
and
never know
it
these
happened in
days.
the Appalachians. So Sean is an arrogant, obnoxious trombone player, and most trombone players say, well, that's redundant. But he's a problem to the orchestra because he's very talented and he's a great businessman, and he has made them very successful. But he's also throwing these wild parties every time they go on tour. He's harassing women. He's cheating on his girlfriend. He's gambling. And they're just waiting for the day they're going to get a lawsuit for some of his antics. And so they're debating, how are we going to fire him? How's that going to work? But we can't keep him because he's going to cause us a lawsuit. And so they go on tour to Scotland, and his girlfriend has enough. They go up to a Scottish tower. So the tower here is called a keep, and they go up to the top of a ruined tower, and they're going to have a midnight picnic, and they get into a fight, and she has always believed there's something better in him because when they're alone together, he drops this act that he puts on and he does behave differently. And she finally says, you know what? I was wrong. You really are the jerk that everybody says you are. And she drives off, and he's convinced the whole time, you wouldn't even jaywalk on an empty street. You're not going to take the car and drive. And she does. And so he falls asleep and he wakes up in the wrong century. And in fact, in 1314, there's a Highland warrior named Neil Campbell. He also goes up to the top of the same tower, gets into an argument with his betrothed, who would like to go on the journey with him that he has to go on to raise troops for Robert Bruce. And they have an argument, and he stays in the tower and falls asleep, and they wake up in each other's times. Well, for reasons that might be obvious, but I go into later in the series, they look exactly alike. And so poor Neil is caught in modern Scotland with this American orchestra, where half the people hate him and the other half expect him to throw wild parties. And he has to finally get on people's good side so he can get some help. And he's told, if you do not play this concert on a trombone, you're going to be fired. Well, to medieval ears, I'm going to be fired? You're going to set me on fire? You're going to burn me at the stake? And so he ends up playing harp for the concert, which is what he can play. And meanwhile, Sean is caught in a world where he doesn't have his fame and his wealth to get out of scrapes anymore. And he finds that the men of medieval Scotland are not quite so forgiving or cowed as the men in modern America. And so he has to make some changes if he's going to survive. And he's forced to really start looking at himself. And so I thought this was going to be one book where he does his act of redemption and the story's over and I'll write another book. And my sister read it and said, well, what happens next? And I went back and I reread the ending because it was a confusing question to me, considering what I thought I had written. I went back, read it, and said, I didn't actually write what I thought I wrote. What if? What if he survives this injury? What would it be like for him to be caught in medieval Scotland? And so the story goes on as he and Neil end up together again. They hate each other. because Sean is who he is, and Neil he's a product of his time. He's noble, he's chivalrous, he believes in his faith and honesty and courage and fighting for the common good and, the bigger ideal.
Yeah.
They hate each other, but nobody can explain who this extra person is. And so they have to spend 2 years basically being the same person. And whoever is not being Neil that day has to wear Brother Andrew's robe with the cowl hiding his face. And so it was an awful lot of fun writing all of that as they start to really get to know each other better as each one of them is changing a little bit and so on. And so finally, I can't give away the ending, but there is an ending that wraps up the story. And so I know a lot of people want me to keep writing this world and Sean and Neil. One day I will, if there's another story to tell, but I think a danger some authors can get into is if you just keep writing the book because people want it, the danger is there really a story arc anymore? Or are you just throwing problems at the people to make a story? But there has to be an overarch, and problem, and I think I reached the natural end of that. So one day I hope to write some short stories about some of the other people in the world of Glen Merrill, which is what the castle is called there, but not today.
I love that. You know what? So this is so cool. So what sparked your fascination with that time period and like merging it with this? And this is going to be a two-part because I don't want to interrupt you, but I'm like, I gotta ask you this, or ask you if you see this. Like, there's so much symbolism, like, in the whole world of psychology here, and in this story, it's like you're having it's like you're having to deal with the shadow self, right? That person that's stripped away of everything that's
Right.
you normally have. I mean, I'm just looking at it like there's so much symbolism in just what you told me. Gosh, that's just, it's so creative. So creative.
I actually asked, and I forget what prompted me to do this, but I asked AI to tell me about the symbolism in my books.
Yeah.
I know why it was, because I was writing an article for my blog, and
Yeah.
I had that famous kind of cartoon or picture that says what the teacher says the blue curtains symbolize in the scene in the author's book, and how they represent sadness and depression and alienation from society and on and on. And then it says what the author says the blue curtains meant. They kind of swear in the cartoon, but the curtains are blue. That's all I meant. And so as I was writing this about what do authors mean versus what readers see, I thought, well, I'll ask AI. And it was really interesting what it came up with, all these symbolisms I supposedly intended. And I looked at that and I went, I wish I had intended that.
Yeah.
That's pure
But maybe
genius.
You never know. You may have on a subconscious level.
I may have.
We have a lot in there.
Right. And I thought it doesn't matter because that's part of the magic of a book.
Exactly.
We all might get different things out of the books. But you asked what sparked my interest in the time. Trombone, believe it or not. I had no interest in, I kind of liked history once I read historical fiction.
Yeah.
Once there was a story to it. It's not interesting the way it's taught in high school, but it is in reality. And so I didn't really have any knowledge of 1314 Scottish history, but because my main instrument was trombone, my degree is in music, and I majored on trombone. So I spent a lot of time with the instrument. I played in orchestras, I played in big bands, I played for the pit orchestra for ballets and musicals and things. It was a lot of fun. But I don't know if it's still true today, but at the time I was in high school and college, a piece called Blue Bells of Scotland was huge. Trombone players wanted to be able to play it to prove how good they were. And it's an amazing piece. It's what we call a theme and variation. So it starts with a very simple rendition of the Scottish folk song that's called Blue Bells of Scotland. And then it gets more and more wild. It goes from the pedal tones up to, like 4.5 octaves above that. I think a trombone, it has an amazing range. And so in case anyone wants to know what pedal tones are, it's really cool. You have to really relax your mouth and you get this sound that's even lower than Crinkles, my sheep, when she's yelling at me, which is really, really low. And in the old days, when there were tubes in the television, it was so much fun to stand in front of the TV and blow a pedal tone, and the screen would start to do that with the waves. They don't do that anymore. But anyway, that's where the title came from. And I thought, well, if he's a trombone player, which obviously being, part of me, he is going to be.
Yeah.
This is going to be his signature piece that he plays at the end of every concert, and he's showing off and all this. And it went from there to, well, if the book is called Blue Bells of Scotland, if that's the piece he plays, it makes sense that it takes place in Scotland. So taking it a step further, the lyrics of the original folk song have to do with streaming banners and noble deeds, not noble banners or streaming deeds. That's the kind of book I want to read. So I thought, well, that's the kind of book I want to write. And where are you going to find noble deeds? In a war? I like to think you could find noble deeds elsewhere, but that's where most of them are going to be found, where we're really under pressure and danger. And we have to decide to act courageously and noble. And so I started researching, discovered this whole world I didn't know. I was looking specifically for famous battles in Scottish history. And Bannockburn is probably the most famous. Some of the Jacobite battles, Culloden, I don't know how that's pronounced. That's pretty famous too. But that was a loss. And Bannockburn was the most amazing victory that Scotland has ever seen under, in my humble opinion, their greatest king, Robert the Bruce. And so, shout out to my husband. I am still in love with Jamie Douglas, his right-hand man. But as my husband says, he's alive. Jamie isn't, but I am in love with him. I always will be. But James Douglas and Robert the Bruce they were two absolutely amazing men. And the story of how they won Bannockburn is incredible, or I should say at Bannockburn, because it's so far back in history, we don't have 100% reliable sources. But the best guess, it was approximately 5 against approximately 20,000 Englishmen. And, that's some pretty bad odds for the Scots. And it gets even worse because the Scots had axes, they had pikes, they had, farm implements, and they had leather armor, basically leather coats to protect themselves. They had the horses they rode on were called garrons. They're extinct today, but they were not much bigger than a Connemara pony. So they're basically riding ponies with pitchforks and leather. The English, 20,000 of them, are riding the big, gigantic war horses with metal armor, with lances, with, more advanced equipment for the time. Mm-hmm. And yet, Robert the Bruce not only beat them, he routed them. He sent them running off the field, screaming like little girls. So, which probably is politically incorrect to say, but too bad.
He's a warrior.
Edward II ran from the field and basically had to be rescued and whisked away. So it's an amazing story. And like I said, I had no knowledge of that time. I had no knowledge of Scotland, really, besides they have a really cool brogue. And it was by way of trombone that I ended up in that time and that place because of a song called Blue Bells of Scotland.
So interesting. Interesting.
And so you asked about symbolism. Were you curious what symbolism I intended?
Yeah. So this is the thing, like with that, I think sometimes that when we do create, maybe we have intentions in mind, but yet I always think that our creator uses us, right? Uses our creativity to give a message or to serve in a certain way or to provide something in this journey, right? Because really the goal is to evolve. And so when you evolve, it's your awakening. I think we're at a state where we've got this massive awakening. It's on Earth. And so, yeah. So what was what intentions did you sow into it that you knowingly did, but then what were the intentions that you found that you were surprised about in the symbolism when you did your research on AI?
I would have to pull up that blog post. Started it. I shouldn't say I started it. I finished it. I just didn't get all the symbolism into it.
Yeah, I'm just interesting because I'm always fascinated with that, from a state of consciousness, right, and remembrance. Like what were maybe in your because we do, in our subconscious, we have a lot of information, we'll say there, data,
right.
that
right.
we can extract, right? So
yeah,
I would be interested in that.
In a way, it just, people ask about the influences. The song title was one, playing trombone was one.
Super cool, though. I love the connection.
Yeah, it's not how people normally end up in Scotland. Let me see if I can find this blog post. But I think, to me, the things that I was really interested in, number one, Sean just kind of came to me. It was like he existed. I often felt like I was really kind of transcribing what really happened rather than making things up, it's a very strange feeling. And I did find this
interesting
post. But to me, the biggest story in there was this theme of redemption. And in a way, I hate to say that because redemption sounds like a heavy topic, and it could make people think, oh, I don't feel like a really heavy book, with these heavy themes. But most people, I think probably everyone, I think they feel it's a very quick read. Many people have said these books are thick. This is not one of the thicker ones. So I think some of them are upwards of 350, maybe the thickest one might be 400 pages. But they say it's a very quick read. And I think Sean's a very fun guy. Even though he's obnoxious and horrible and cheating on his girlfriend, he's also funny. And he's very generous. And this is the weird thing about writing him. I don't think I'm a very funny person. Like, I could never be a comedian. But I'm sitting there writing and words just come out of his mouth. I'm like, where did that come from?
Yeah.
I wouldn't think to say that in that situation, but he does. And it just comes out of the typewriter. So to me, redemption and the question of why people become who they are. Because all my life, and it probably goes back to things in childhood, but I've been fascinated by people's character. And why are you the way you are? Why are some people shy and uncomfortable and unconfident, not confident?
Yeah.
Why are some people so confident, so arrogant? Why are some people bullies?
Yeah.
Why did they become that way? And so over the course of the 5 books, I do very much get into why did Sean become who he did? And I kind of dig into, there's an event in his past that gradually comes out. But it's not just this happened to him. That's why he is the way he is. It's this happened to him. It essentially happened to his mother too, but they went 2 opposite ways.
Yeah.
So we also choose. We do have things happen to us, but it's not an excuse. We still choose. How are we going to respond to that? So let's see. I think that the AI gave me probably about 10 or 12. So one thing that they said is symbolism, the Blue Bells themselves, the actual, both the flowers and the folk song, that those are symbolic. And so people can find this. It's at my bluebellstrilogy.blogspot.com. It's called AI Analysis of Symbolism in the World of the Blue Bells Trilogy. And you will recognize it. Can you kind of see that?
Yeah, I can see that. And where is that?
Yeah, it's bluebellstrilogy.blogspot.com.
Okay.
So AI concluded that both the flowers and the folk song are symbolic, and it's hard. I don't want to spend the time sitting here. Okay, so for instance, bluebells symbolize humility and constancy as per Victorian flower language, which reflects overlooked qualities. How overlooked qualities in flawed characters like Sean are revealed under pressure. Or you could say that symbolizes Amy, who maybe goes too far for too long in being humble. It says the trombone is a symbolism. Now, this is one thing that I actually did intentionally bring out, where I brought up the history of the trombone. It's very fascinating. I accidentally wrote a version of history that actually happened. So in the story, Sean walks into this Midwestern orchestra, auditions for second chair, and they're so blown away by his audition that they kick the first chair player down to second and make him the principal player. I didn't realize that actually happened to Arthur Pryor, who arranged the theme and variations, Blue Bells of Scotland. But Amy says in the first book that Sean is a lot like the trombone, where people originally thought it couldn't do anything but go oompa, oompa, because it's such a clumsy, unwieldy instrument, with the slide and the embouchure and all these things. It's not, flute is easy. It's really easy to get very proficient on flute compared to getting that proficient on trombone. And at one point, Arthur Pryor was given a trombone when he was only 12. And he figured out all these alternate positions. He figured out how to become a prodigy on this very unwieldy instrument. And that's why he wrote the piece, to show that a trombone can do so much more than you think it can. And so she does say, you're like that. You present this view to the world, but I know there's so much more to you. There is so much good in you if you would just let the world see it instead of acting the way you do. So AI did pick up on that, and that was one I did intentionally. Yeah.
That's interesting that AI picked up on that.
It was fascinating, and I haven't written, it looks like those are the only two I had, but it came up with several that I thought, I wish I had thought of that. I wish I had deliberately used it like that.
Well, maybe it'll help. Maybe it'll help you write the next one,
right?
If you want to conclude,
Yeah. If I ever go back to it.
Yeah, that's got to be hard when you've done this is it's a series, right? And it's like, yeah, I could see why people they really love it. It's just, the whole time travel thing is fascinating to me. Speaking of time travel.
Is this the question?
Yeah, I mean, it's just such a fascinating topic, right? And, Project Looking Glass, the whole remote viewer.
Yes.
There's a girl, let me think of her name. She's on YouTube, and she claims to be a remote viewer. And I'm not saying that she's not. I'm just putting that out there. That's her claim. I think her name it's Elizabeth April.
Okay.
So yeah, check her out. She's on YouTube, and she has 393,000 followers.
Okay, I'll have to look that up.
So, but that, followers doesn't, use your discernment. But, I think there's a handful of folks that I've seen that does the remote viewing. You've got the Project Looking Glass, you got Project Blue Beam, you got Project, there's so many projects, but the whole thing, I think, with time travel, and what's fascinating about it is that looping in that CIA declassification that I talked about earlier, there's a little piece of that in there, the
right
time component.
Yeah, military intelligence, I think it is a fascinating subject, especially in relation to things like this, aliens, time travel. My dad happened to be a military officer. If he knew anything, he never told me. But I do remember one day he was looking at, it was some kind of submarine in Popular Mechanics, Popular Science, one of those. And the magazine, this was around 1990, I think, was touting this as this amazing new thing that just came out. And he said, I've known about that for 25 years. The public is just finding out. And it really made me aware how much we do not know. You know, I know other people who have some clearance, and I don't know these things. Don't anyone come and, try and get information out of me. I don't have it. I just know that the people who do know, there is a lot that we are not being told. So I know that Albert Einstein believed time travel is possible. And he theorized, I think his theory was that it's either like a river or like a coil.
Yeah.
And so if the river loops back on itself, wormholes too, you can.
Let's talk about the wormholes, because I said this back in 2020, and I don't know where it came from, but remember that movie with Jodie Foster? It was Jodie Foster, and I think Matthew McConaughey was in it. I don't know if she had something to do with astronomy. She was studying something. I don't know.
I think I know what you're talking about, but I can't remember the title.
Contact. Okay, so Contact. Right. And in that movie, she gets in this thing and it takes her through a wormhole. And then the next thing you know, she comes across this, like, what seems to be a hologram, right? And she sees her father on the beach. And they have a little conversation. And this has been a long time since I've watched this. But if we look at the CIA and we look at these intelligence agencies across the world, to include Mossad, to include all this other stuff, right? All the other ones. And we know that we're now finding out that Hollywood's involvement in this, right? And CIA's connection to Hollywood, that Hollywood is a predictive programming machine, because then if people can say, oh, that only happens in the movies, right? She plays a character, astronomer, Dr. Eleanor Arroway. And so they were looking at a star system, Vega, and they were talking about these signals that they kept getting in the mathematical patterns. And here's the thing about the mathematics, right? When we look at quantum physics and how sound, right, the sound waves and everything, and there's mathematics to that. The sound waves produce, like if you put sand on this vibration plate, it makes a geometry kind of
pattern, right?
Right, a pattern. And so all of that has to do with the mathematical equations, and then you trace that back to the Hermetic principles of cause and effect, and that there is a mathematical, it's quantum mechanics, and so of this universe. And then the whole thing about wormholes, like that was in that movie, and I'm like telling folks, I'm like, could it be? And that was before I even kind of dove down that rabbit hole, but it's very interesting.
My husband actually works in quantum computing, so you've given us a lot to talk about at dinner tonight.
Big time.
So he's taking quantum principles and applying it to increasing, all kinds of cool stuff, but in the world of computing that you can apply it.
It's absolutely fabulous, and so when you pay attention and you put that back there in your database, because that's what your brain is. It's a database, right? So I saw that movie, something about this wormholes talking about the wormhole thing with time traveling. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what is going on here? And then you have the whole concept of Alice in Wonderland, right? So there we go with another Hollywood predictive programming. I mean, there's so much that there's so many movies that can kind of mimic the things that are going on, right? It's just it's a fascinating subject to me, the time travel. I really think it's cool. I'm like, maybe I need to start. Maybe that's the topic that I need to start researching again, because I find it fascinating. Because I mean, if you think about it, if we were to leave Earth and go somewhere else, that would be time travel. So would it be so far-fetched that death would be time travel?
How would that work? I'm just trying to...
Well, you leave the body.
envision.
You're just leaving the meat suit.
Yeah. Well,
Right? So the
have
soul
you...
is infinite because energy
Right.
cannot be destroyed or created. So the energy leaves the body and it leaves. If that's the case, then that's travel. So it's fascinating to me. And look, I'm in the infancy, stages
Studying
of
this?
this. Definitely not an expert, but it's just something I find to be kind of fascinating that I would love to research.
I think it's an amazing field. And one of the things
Yeah.
that I came across as I was researching, I had never heard of this before. There is an actual phenomenon called time slips. I'm guessing you've heard of that.
Yeah. Time slips.
Yes, time slips. And so there are a few very famous ones.
Let me interrupt you for a second. Time slips, would that be related to the deja vu?
No, not the same thing at all.
So
Time
deja
slips,
vu is, from what I understand, is a future glimmer, right?
deja vu is the feeling that you've had this conversation before, or that this thing has happened to you before.
Yeah. Okay.
But time slips, I hardly know which one to pick as the example. They're all so fascinating. But we'll go with, there were some boys, it wasn't a Boy Scout camp, but I think it was something like that, where they were sent out into the English countryside. I think this happened about in the 80s, maybe. I could be off by a decade either way. They were sent out to do this scouting expedition, whatever it was that they were supposed to be doing out in the English countryside. And they're looking at their maps and their compass and all of a sudden there's a village where their map said there shouldn't be. They're walking through the village and nobody was there. And it was a very old, like medieval-esque village. They noticed that there was still meat hanging in the butcher shop and it was all kind of greenish. I forget what else they saw, but they're thinking this is very strange. Where is everybody? And this is not supposed to be here according to our map. So they kept going. They passed through the village, finished whatever this thing was they were supposed to be doing, got back and told their leader, there's a village here where there shouldn't be. They went back and there was no village there. They did some research and found out that in that location, this was near Kersey, England, Kersey, that there had been a village there and everybody in it died of the Black Plague. And that's why that village no longer existed. There is another one, I believe it was two couples who were going on a road trip, I think across France. You can tell it's been a long time since I've read these.
Yeah.
And they stayed at this very quaint old hotel. And I think they even bought like lace handkerchief or something from the place. And they just loved this place so much, had dinner, interacted with the staff, although everybody was kind of strangely quiet. And on their way home, they said, we really want to stop there again. They went to the same town, went to where the hotel had been. It wasn't there, and they asked around and people said, you're crazy, you didn't stay in that hotel because it's been gone for decades. And so there aren't very many of these time slip stories that seem to be very valid, but they do seem valid by the fact that they're things people didn't want to talk about and they finally just kind of came out in a conversation and then got better known. So I'm sure that there are people who make up these things, but there are a few that have kind of the earmarks of being valid, where they don't want to talk about it, where they say, you're going to think I'm crazy. I don't want people thinking I'm crazy. This couldn't have happened. And yet this particular couple who bought the handkerchief, they had the handkerchief. They had the physical proof.
May I interject for a minute with the thinking I'm crazy and all that stuff? I think, here's the thing. With that, what I've come to realize, I think, in my journey with regard to that, I don't want people to think I'm crazy, or with people calling other people crazy. I'm the sanest that I've ever been at this moment in time, because I've questioned any and all things, and I'm open.
because it's pretty obvious that we've been lied to about a lot of things, and reasons why, maybe we'll, some things we may know, some things we may never know, but I would like to normalize, let's get back to I remember a time when I was growing up, and I'm 55, that when we were connected and we talked to our elders, or we talked to people and they shared their wisdom with us, we didn't think they were crazy, right?
Right. No, I certainly didn't.
And it's like, I think everything we should be open to everything, I guess, is where I'm getting.
And I was even going to kind of bring it back to the whole, I'm going to call it the scamdemic.
Yeah.
Whoever thought that our government would lie to us on that scale? Whoever thought that our government would force us to take things that were untested? That was insane. Anybody with the most basic medical knowledge knows that you don't go and give a new medicine to people without years of testing. I mean, my uncle was a medical researcher. My first husband worked in a medical research facility. But everybody should know this.
The one thing about that, I spent 23 years in clinical research, right? In or around big pharma. Most of my experience is in device, but still, I know how that process works, right? And there's a reason why we test things, because when they get out into you want to make sure that they're safe before they get out to the general public. So the moment that happened, I was like, red flag. That's not how it's done. And I literally, and that's another thing that maybe I haven't yet healed from, is you're in my business. You're in my medical business. You're in my, you're not allowing me to make the best choices for myself.
Right.
And folks just saying, oh, just take the damn thing. Just take the damn thing. And it's like, no, you're not understanding what's going on here. And this is a red flag. Hello. The fear and the way folks were in this survival mode, it was like, what is going on? I remember friends calling me about if their docs wanted to put them on a medication. I would just pull it up. I'd read the data under the adverse events. Okay, let's see what you're getting into. Because I don't, it's why you have resources, but I know exactly where to go to get those resources. I didn't even get that from this. And I'm just like, I don't understand how you get all of these folks to do this. There is no safety data. There is now.
And it's not good.
There was no safety data. There is now.
Right.
And I want to take that back. There was safety data on the actual, that research, mRNA research back in 2008 in preclinical trials. There is data, and there's reasons why they didn't move it forward to clinical trials.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then you look at, hold on a second, it's coming to me. Myriad Genetics went to the Supreme Court, asked them if they could patent DNA. The Supreme Court said, absolutely not. DNA is God. That's God's creation. You can't patent that, but you can patent altered. And so it's like, you start to piece these, what is this about? And what's that about? And you start to, and then, but here's another thing, is that not everybody we do. That's part of our makeup, is that we are critical thinkers, but as this had progressed, and we know it was all planned, that as it's progressed, we understand there's been some manipulation there. But when you go back and you look at these things and you start to connect the dots, I mean, it's not a conspiracy. And let's just go back to, there was no safety data. And so that was my, I'm like, okay, what can I tangibly use as an argument here of not taking it? There is no safety data.
Were you in a
End of
position?
discussion. Like, there shouldn't be any more discussion after that. Why aren't you taking the and I'm like, because there is no safety data. That would totally go against what I did for a living. Patient safety, data integrity. Where's the data? Where's the patient safety? How about this? The number one thing that came from the Declaration, or was it Declaration of Helsinki, or was it the Nuremberg Code? Everyone is to be
brought that
given
up a lot
informed
at the time.
consent. Where was the informed consent? Where was the data that happened in 2008? Why weren't you talking to your patients about that data? Like, you had to have some preconceived risks. You had to have known what was going to be anticipated. That was not shared. And you go back to the prescribing instructions that have to be in there. It was totally whited out, intentionally left blank. But yet, I'm a conspiracy theorist.
Well, how much do you
I'll
think?
gladly wear the title.
Because
now
you were
here we
proven
are.
right.
Here we
How
are.
much do you think the general public is waking up to this 5 years down the road? Do you think more and more people are realizing they were lied to?
You know, I sat down. I said, I'm going to give you, just let me give you a little story. So I sat down with a friend of mine. We went to dinner, and she had just gotten it 12 days later. I had an ablation, so I didn't have periods. But 45 minutes into our lunch, I began spotting. To the
Really?
point where, yes, to the point that I had to end up making an appointment to go in and talk to my gynecologist. Him and I sat down, and I said, look, I'm like, Doc, let's keep it real. And he said, he told me, flat out, he said, look, I told everybody in this practice that they highly, highly suggest not getting it because there is no safety data. And I'm like, hallelujah. And so he said that, and I'm not going to say who he is, but he said that we will not know the repercussions of this until we're at least 5 years out. And well, here we are, 5 years out, going on 5 years out, and we see an increase in cancer. And when I say increase, I'm talking 6, 7, 8-fold increase.
I have a friend who recovered from breast cancer. She did it with organic diet. And she told me that she knows all these people who had breast cancer at the same time. She said every single one who took that shot has had the cancer come back, every single one. And I've heard the same thing. And in fact, I know someone personally who had a form of cancer she shouldn't have had absolutely none of the lifestyle choices that would have led to that kind of cancer.
Yeah.
And yet she got it.
Yeah. It's interesting. And then, now we have some information coming out in the files about that too, which is pretty interesting.
Are those files are touching on COVID? I think I had heard that, but I've kind of drifted away from listening to political videos while I'm outside working with the sheep. So I missed the detail on that.
There are some things that are coming out. And like hey, look, my thing is, I don't know everything, and I don't claim to know everything, and I haven't yet dialed into it. I know some people that are kind of researchy like me, so I kind of trust what they say. But I haven't had the time to dive into it. I would love to. Maybe we can have another podcast and talk about it. I don't know. But
after we both listen to that.
Yeah, after we've dug into it. But the majority of those files have been there. They've been on you have to search, but that information's been out here for a long time, folks, and it's just being officially released by our government. I think that there's reasons for that. I'm not going to get into that, but I think there's reasons for that. But yeah, I mean, look at this, and it's pretty. And then you connect the dots, and we could be here for hours talking about it. And I'm here for it because I love to research, and I love to seek. and find. But yeah, it's the one thing that I always went back to was and this is what I say, you really should get that. Okay, why? Show me the safety data. Well, there isn't any safety data. Okay, then I'm not taking it. Because if I was going to go take a drug for, let's say, if I had aggressive form of arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis. If I was going to go take a drug for rheumatoid arthritis, which there's so many side effects from those. That's why I picked it on purpose, because they have so many side effects. All you have to do is go and research the PI, and you can see that. And that's what you should do. If you're going to take a medication, you go to the adverse events, adverse reactions, because that's where all the data is compiled for all of the AEs that have happened, adverse events. So AEs are adverse events that are taken from the trial. They're all put into a data thing and they spit it out, right? So many percentage of this, so many percentage of this, and then looking at what's the percentage? What's the number, right? What's the N number, right? And looking at that, that's how you can make a decision. Do I really need to be on this? You're weighing the risk benefit ratio. And I don't know, that whole time period just pisses me off. It really, 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 really pisses me off. And
to me, I think it was a trial run.
Yeah, it was, and to turn us against each other and having people in my business about my medical affairs. No, I don't think so.
I'll tell you something.
Telling me what I should be doing and what I shouldn't be doing. And it's like, who are you?
Yeah, we moved to Duluth in 2021 and some of this stuff was still going on. So I had a friend who invited me to go to the theater with them to see a musical. I showed up and I'm in this long line, and somebody at the door is letting people through one by one. They weren't requiring masks, I don't think. Oh, actually, I think they weren't. I ignored them. So I got up to the front, and that came up later. I got up to the front and they literally said to me, "Show me your papers." I was shocked. I was literally like, what papers? What are you talking about? They said, "We need to see your proof that you're vaccinated." I said, "Well, I'm not." And they said to me, this was hilarious. The musical happened to be Annie. So I was going to meet these friends. It was a party of 12. They said to me, "Well, it's okay. You can run and get vaccinated and we'll let you into the show this evening." And I'm like, I don't like any musical enough to inject myself with untested drugs, let alone Annie. I was only here to see my friends. You really think I'm going to take an untested drug so I can sit by myself to see a musical I don't even like? I thought it was the funniest thing. So they shuffled me over to another room. They were trying to let my friends know, find them to let them know I wasn't going to make it. And finally, one of them is like, "Here's a mask." Like, "No, thank you." And I left. But, show me your papers.
Show me your papers. That sounds familiar.
Doesn't it? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So anyway, I'm glad that time is over. Unfortunately, I do think it was a trial run. You were talking about we've been talking about the illogica of it. My husband worked 100% of the time from home. Computer screen like you and me.
Yeah.
And they told him, "You have to get it." He's like, "Why?" I'm literally, there's nobody in the room. There's nobody in my house. I'm not seeing any of you in person. Do you think you're going to get it through the computer screen? They're like, "Doesn't matter. That's the policy." He did apply for both a medical and religious exemption, and he got it. But we were prepared to lose everything. He was not going to take it. And when I see some of the adverse reactions, up to and including death, I'm just so grateful. I'm so grateful he took that risk instead of going, "We just bought a house, I'm going to have to do what they say." He was willing to take a stand. And I think had 50% of people or even 30% taken a stand and said no, they would have had to back down. But not enough people were willing to take the risk.
I don't even know what the numbers are. I don't even know. I know that I was never forced, but I will say was interviewing, and there was a job offer, and the job offer required that. And I said, well, that's not happening. Well, why not? Where's this? And I said the same thing. I'm like, y'all are in research. Where's the safety data? They had to have some sort of data to move into this. Like, you can't just pull some, come on. Like, and it was made so fast. What's going on here?
Well, and I've wondered, I've heard the
I think
theory.
it's what's left. I'm gonna tell you. I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt, but I think it's what's left over from 2008. That's what I think. I think by
that they had it.
You know what?
Already.
They were gonna get that money back. That investment back.
Because I've heard the theory that they had this drug, and I believe they knew that it was going to hurt people, because that's part of the global elites, is that Bill Gates thinks we need to reduce humanity by 90% or 95%.
Yeah.
And I wish people would wake up to this and realize when they talk about reducing carbon, you are the carbon they want to reduce. They believe they need to cut down the human population, and they're not volunteering themselves. They're volunteering you.
Yeah, it is truly, you like I said, you start to connect the dots, and you're like, well, what is going on here, and why do these folks own so much farmland in our country? And
yes,
it's just, you just come to the point where it's like, you do enough digging, you come to the conclusion, like, it doesn't look too hot, it doesn't look too good. But I don't know, I feel, but like, not with my I don't know how to say this in a way where it's like, doesn't sound woo woo, but I believe that there is something that is going on a spiritual level, because
I absolutely believe that.
Why would it doesn't make logical sense that they would release all of this information for what?
Which information specifically are you talking about?
Just in general.
You mean
like
the
information about the fraud and where our money is going, and just the absolute, like, I don't know. I don't understand. I don't know. It's hard because I don't understand the logic of some folks,
or the illogic, as the case may be. There is none. And I do understand those who are telling us the lies for their objective. What I don't understand is the ordinary person who I would like to think should be able to logically see this doesn't make sense.
Right.
As I said, forcing old people to stand out in the snow and cold to save them from getting sick, that makes no sense. That's not true. And, I'm following a lot of the things about Charlie Kirk. Mm-hmm. And not to get into that, but it's just another example of how the more threads you pull, the less any of it makes sense. And all these connections, and all these connections among people. I've been listening to Candace Owens talking about it, and you're talking about connections, and she keeps finding all these connections. Why are so many people associated with the military? Why are so many associated with Fort Huachuca? Why are so many associated? There are just too many connections, too many coincidences.
Too many. And I think most folks that we talk about the military, right? And we talk about that being one military. And so it's not. There is the military that's the high brass that is being controlled. And then there's the ranks and files, right? The ranks and files are still saying, I'm not saying that hasn't been infiltrated. I'm sure it has. But I would say that it's not been overly infiltrated, because most people that serve, they're serving for a good intention.
I think so.
And I'm just talking about the guys and the gals like myself, right? Now, you have the higher brass the more, top secret stuff, the things that are going on out there in the desert and the tunnels in the Denver area and all of these military things that are going on that are top secret, like that sort of stuff has been infiltrated. So this is often, theorized as the deep state. So there's two different militaries, right? I would say there's those that are for the light, those that are for the dark, is what I say. So I think that needs to be said. I don't know. We could be here all day
night
talking about the layers upon layers with regard to Charlie Kirk. That whole thing, that's a web too. And I think most definitely he was taken out. I don't know, maybe I really don't know, the ins and the outs of it, but I think it's pretty obvious why he must have known too much. And so when someone knows too much and they take them off the map, and then I think what was most disturbing about that event was the celebration.
That's what I was going to say.
And
how much,
and I'm not picking on that persuasion, but I'm going to say it because I see it also on the other side too, right? If you want to be on the left and right, which is total illusion anyway, it's all an illusion. It's just to keep people divided. But if you say you're on that side and you're doing it, and then the folks on the right are doing it when it happens on the left, it's just not a good look from a spiritual standpoint. I think a loss of life, when people are cheering over a loss of a life or attempted assassinations and things like this is a time where if you're cheering, maybe you need to do a little mirror work and ask yourself, where's that coming from? Right. Where's that coming from? Where is that darkness coming from that I hate someone that I don't even know?
It's beyond that, though. It's that for so many people, the hatred absolutely consumes them and takes over their lives. And I see this online, but I also saw it. I used to do a lot of open mics pretty regularly in the Minneapolis area. We had one person, name his name, anyone who went to that knows who I'm talking about. All he ever did with his turn at the open mic was make nasty little comments about Trump that were meant to be funny. And really, it was just someone up there saying nasty things about another person. That's all he ever talked about. I think I knew him for 4 years. The only thing I ever knew about him was he really, really, really hates Donald Trump. He died. I read his obituary. I think he had actually been a professor of jazz. He was kind of renowned for his great jazz collection. He had kids. He had all these interests, all these intellectual pursuits and hobbies. He had a really fascinating life. And he took all of that and he just closed it down till the only thing left in his life was hate Trump. How does that affect your character? How does that affect how you live? How does that affect your own happiness? I have politicians I don't like, but when I post, I'm going to post about a whole lot of things, about my sheep, about my rabbits, about music, about ideas, philosophers. And maybe once in a blue moon, you're going to see me, to be honest, the politician I'm thinking of, I don't think I've ever posted a thing online about her. If I see something she's posting on X that I disagree with, sure, I'll say, that's not true. Or, stop being so hateful or whatever. I might address it, but it's not my whole life. I have this vast world that has nothing to do with how I feel about politicians. And even then, I don't hate them. I think they're wrong. And I think what they're doing is bad for the country, but I'm not consumed with this hatred or a desire to see them harmed. Yes. I don't feel that.
Yeah, it comes to a point where it's like, if we lost our humanity, where we're celebrating that, and they think that's, and when you sit back and I've done a lot of work, obviously, since COVID on myself, so I'm able to sit back and observe. I understand that, like, when I see things, like, I don't have to say anything. Is what I say going to land with this person? Well, we're going through a time where there's change in consciousness, right? And some folks are still kind of tapped into the system, and they're allowing the system. Another thing, I'm like, this is another thing that drives me nuts, is the very same people that lied to us, that were paid to lie to us every single freaking day, that had the death ticker. Yeah.
Yes.
Every single day, those folks lied to us, and and I'm saying this to people, and you still put stock into what they are telling you. And it just comes to a point where you're like, and what I'm listening to, is this true? Like, and I was someone who never watched the news. So when I'm sitting down and I'm finally back home after being in New York, and I see what's going on, literally I'm seeing what's going on, and how this virus is so deadly. Okay, we're going to cut the president off mid-sentence. If you want to hear any more of that, go over here to that. But yet, it's life or death. What's going on here? So it's little things like that, when you can sit back and be in the present and observe about what's going on, instead of someone telling you what's going on, instead of you watching the programming device and it's saying this is going on. Now I see people are breaking away, which is amazing, but there's still the group of people that are being manipulated, and it's this back and forth stuff, and it's like, man, it's I had to pull away from that. I had to go on my own journey. I stopped watching any podcasts. I didn't really post on Facebook. I didn't get on Facebook. I didn't get on any other social media. I took a break for about 6 months. It was the best decision I ever made, because I came to the reality, like, this reality is like, it's been faked. We're being lied to by these people that are being paid high dollar to lie to us. And it's like, why are we trusting these people that lied to us? And then on top of that, why are we trusting and outsourcing our connection to our Creator to folks that caved during that time to the tyranny? I think there were maybe a handful of pastors that stood up during that time. I don't want to hear it.
If even that.
I don't. I literally don't want to hear it. Like, I've been on my journey. I know who God is. I know who the Creator is. I sit with God every day, and I don't need to outsource anything. I know there is no separation from God, and you know this. You're connected to the earth, so it's like, how we. I just, like, the whole time just makes me so, like, and I don't know, maybe after we get done with this podcast, I might have to sit with myself for a little bit and ask myself, why do I still get fired up about that time? And I think sitting after this conversation that we've had and what we've talked about, I mean, we've talked about a lot in this short period of time.
But I think
it just makes me so mad.
Yep. I think part of the reason it might make you still mad, and I think in a way all of us should be mad, because then it makes us think and it makes us prepare better. As I said, I believe that was only a warm-up. I do believe that what they're going to roll out is something like that. Now, I follow two things closely: prophecy and politics. They're both going the same way. And what I find interesting, I think I mentioned earlier, some of these prophets, I'll use the air quotes for, some of them I think are valid. I think they are hearing from God. Some of them, I read what they say and go, I don't think God told you that. Yeah. As I want to say to some of them, well, I'm not going to say what I want to say to some of them, but they're saying, God told me such and right. They're saying, God told me such and such. And I'm thinking, there's no way God told you that, because that's simply isn't true. It's objectively not true. So why would God say that? So, I don't just believe them regardless of what they say. But what I do notice that even some of the ones, if I look at what they say and go, I'm pretty sure you didn't get that from God, they're all pointing in the same direction. More specifically, I just interviewed, I'm wondering if the book is handy. Let me grab this quick. Okay, we've got an entire room and then some of libraries, and I still have all my books piled up beside the table.
So cool.
I interviewed this author in January.
Huh?
And what's interesting about him, I forget if it's on the cover, from 2026 to 2033.
Mm-hmm.
What I find interesting about this is that coming into the last 3-4 months of 2025, I started coming across more and more people who are starting to get very specific. 2026 is when it's starting. Now, he was interesting. He said to me, I didn't want to write this book. I really, really, really did not want to put this book out because if it doesn't start in 2026, I look bad. But I find it interesting how many people who believe they're hearing from God, or in one case, he's on Author's Den. His name, I believe, is Joel. He's done just a lot of research, putting together all sorts of things, and I find it fascinating that they're all coming to the same conclusion. So, which is to say, COVID being a dry run, I think they're working toward pushing us to, you will do this, that, and the other, or you will not be able to eat, you will not be able to buy and sell. And I think we need to be thinking about that, and how are we going to react? And hopefully enough people have looked back on COVID and are angry about what they were forced to do to say, I'm going to do it differently this time. This is how I'm going to react, and I'm not going to be bullied. And, if they take away my ability to buy and sell, I'm going to barter. I'm going to do what we're doing. We're going to grow our own food. We're going to have a community. I'm on a homestead group, and that's one of our leaders' big things, is that we need to have a community. We need to know each other. We need to have people we can count on, because we can't count on our government at this point.
Yeah. And it's been a long time in the planning of this, and I think a lot of folks are not making that connection either, that this has been going on for a very, very long time. More than 10 years, probably
way longer.
You look back, it's been going on for a long time, and you start to connect these dots. And all I have to say is I've learned what peace looks like, and so I've gotten to the point where I don't really care for my peace to be disturbed. So if my peace is disturbed by the likes of this nonsense, it ain't gonna be pretty. Cause I'm all good. I'm good. I'm all love and light up until I'm not.
As a lot of people have been putting out for the last however many years, 2, 3, whatever it's been, that there are an awful lot of us who all we want is to just be left alone.
Yep.
And we're being pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed. And more people are starting to warn, you're getting close to pushing too hard. All we want is to be left alone to live our lives in peace.
Yep.
I don't want to have, but we're finally
absolutely.
going to push back.
And the problem is like, I think these folks that you talk about that have this obsession with being in control of other folks, they do not know what they're messing with.
Right. Well, and I've always said, I don't understand that. It's all I can do to manage my own life. Why would I want to manage anybody else's?
Yeah.
Life is hard enough without.
Like, you're waking up folks that, when you mess with people's peace, and especially when folks have really done the work to attain that peace, I don't know. To be continued, I guess. I don't know. We'll have to see. I'm a optimist. I've always been an optimist, and I think that late in the midnight hour, God always turns things around.
And there are a lot of people who believe He's about to.
Yep.
So it's interesting.
If I know our Creator, look, it's going to happen.
Well, the things I keep reading, keep saying, don't be scared of the possible bad stuff coming, because this is the most exciting time in history to be alive.
Oh, you're giving me chills because it's so true. I often believe, like, I'm like, you know what? I was built for such a time as these because, in my own journey, I've learned to harness that, I'm an Aquarian. I'm an Aquarian, and I have a heart like a warrior, and I think that I am a spiritual warrior and always have been. And I have someone who calls me my spiritual samurai, he says, a friend of mine on Facebook. And it's true. And I think that this is a time when we can work on ourselves, right? And get rid of all that shit, then we can be the best version we are of ourselves for others, right? And when we are the best version, we know how, like, we're not too far off from our true authenticity. I think this is what people don't understand. Like, I've always been that fury. It's just that I know how to harness it now, where it's not off the rails,
right?
But yeah, I'm that person that, don't, pardon my French, don't fuck with me.
Yep.
I'm
and
all love and
more
light
and more
up
of us are getting there.
until I ain't, because I'm not the one. I mean, people have learned that they've misunderstood me, I guess we could say, misinterpreted me. Like,
yes,
yeah, I have the biggest heart. Give you the shirt off my back. You need something, I got it. I'm going to help you out. But at the same time, like, no. And that kind of stuff that went on and during COVID, was that right there was like, you're pushing a line with me.
yes. And I think a lot of people feel like that, and they do reach a point. I mean, for me, I've had that same thing. You misunderstood when I was being nice to you. You thought I was agreeing to be your doormat. No. Now we're done.
I'm like, you know what? You hear the talk like, oh, they're talking about another pandemic, and I'm like, Spirit. I'm like, how it was is just going to even be even more, because now I'm like, I've got that righteous indignation.
Right.
And I'm not even kidding. I'm like, I don't know. I really don't want to be that. I didn't enjoy that. But at the same time, it's like, I don't know. I'm like, who's telling you this? Like, who's telling you that this is a law? Like, you can't just say something is a law. Well, it's on. No, that's that piece of one guy said there's a thing on the wall, or on the door. There's a piece of paper on the door.
Yeah.
I said, and I went out there. I snatched the piece of paper and I said, this piece of paper says put your mask on. Where's the statue? Where is that? And I'm like, where is that? Like, lost my shit.
I have to tell you a funny story.
I can't even take it anymore. I'm done.
In 2020,
beam me up, Scotty.
Right. In the fall of 2020, I was seeing my husband. We had actually been engaged earlier, broke it off, and got back together. And so, because my house was in not the greatest part of the Minneapolis suburbs, where they were threatening to come out with the violence and the riots.
Yeah.
He moved me.
Where did you live in Minneapolis?
Brooklyn Park, which makes the news every now and again.
Yeah, Brooklyn Park. Yes, I have friends that live in Minnesota.
Okay. Well, he moved me into an apartment in one of the better suburbs where I would be a little bit safer. At least we felt like I would be. And in this apartment complex, it was mostly old people. In fact, we qualified to get in because he was just over 55 at the time, or 60, or whatever the age was. Can't have been 60. He's not that old. But anyway, we barely qualified to move into the senior housing. And so they had the signs up all over the place, put your mask on, and we'd start picking at them and pulling them down. And we didn't wear our masks. There was one other person in the apartment. And one day we got a note under our door that the apartment manager was putting under everybody's door. And it went on and on and on about how you need to wear your masks and this and that. And she said, I'm trying to save your lives. And people are ripping down my signs. And it wasn't funny because she was serious. She's one of the ones who really believed that we were all going to die. And so now
that mass, what do you call it? Mass consciousness psychoses or something like this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But yes, I think of her often, like we have one of our little sheep out there. He broke his horn. And so every time I fed them, they would all jostle together and he'd break it again and he'd have blood streaming down his face and it was sad. So we managed to get him into this pen that we created where he can be by himself. He's right, he's got sheep on either side of his fence, but he can eat by himself. The horn can heal. And we were trying to get him in there. And then my other farmhand who comes here on Sundays, he and I were trying to take care of this horn. And so Terry was laying on top of him. He had tied his feet together and was laying on top of him so I could put the stuff on his horn. And of course, the poor thing's panicked, doesn't know why we're doing this. And that's when the line comes out. I say, I'm trying to save your life. Me and Patrice, we're just trying to save your life.
We're just trying to save your life.
Right. Right. And it was so sad. And,
I got this over here.
Well, what's sad is that so many people were genuinely so scared when they didn't have to be. And to see the media lying, I don't know why this came to my mind. I think just today, there was the couple that ate, what was it, like fish food or something like that. And they claimed that, well, Trump said such and such, and that's why they ate I forget what it was, tank cleaner or something like that. But that wasn't what happened at all. And it was easily provable. That's not what happened. And yet they keep telling these lies. And I lucked out in a way.
Some of these folks, some of these folks, they don't look at anything.
Mm-hmm.
They go to the TV or they go to this, and that's the truth. Instead of going and sitting with it and cultivating discernment, they believe what they're being told. And it's super frustrating.
Yeah,
super frustrating.
Is. And I found this early on. And I found this because I had a baby, and I was very young when he was born. And I knew that had I not had strong feelings on the subject, all my college friends would have pushed me to have an abortion. And so I started doing a lot of research, and I had always thought, well, abortion's obviously not good for the baby, but I assumed, well, the women must be happy with it because that's what we're told. I started doing the research, and I found out how many of them are having depression and anxiety and regrets, and they're turning to drugs or alcohol to numb the pain. I found out there are, we had talked about that before. I found out that they are still getting physically injured. I found out, which I don't think I knew, how did all these abortion clinics open up on January 23rd, 1971? It's because it's the same exact people who are doing them in the same exact places anyway. They just had, front business or whatever, or it was, a doctor's office, but he also did that. They weren't being done in back alleys. Maybe a few were, but very, very few. For the most part, they were being done by the same exact doctors on January 22nd who were doing them on January 23rd. The only thing that changed was the law. And the physical risks were always there, and they still are, because as one site put it, how did they describe this? Basically, you're doing an operation pretty much blind because you can't see what you're doing with sharp instruments in a very vulnerable area. Injuries do happen. And so, as I read all this information, this would have been right around 1990. This was way before most people were figuring out that the media is telling us a story, not the news. That's when I found out and realized if the media or whoever's in charge of the media wanted abortion to be illegal, they would be telling us every single one of the stories of these women who are hurt, who are injured, who are killed by this procedure, because it is happening. And they would be telling it over and over every single night of the week until people would be hunting abortionists down and tarring and feather them because they'd be so outraged that these things are happening. Well, the media doesn't want us to think that, so they don't tell us that. And, I'm sure somewhere some women really are just fine with having had one. But the other part is true too, and they won't tell us the balanced story. To say, yes, some women are fine with it, and a bunch aren't.
I agree with what you're saying. I've heard so many stories of women who've had abortions. When I was in high school, I got pregnant by my boyfriend, who was he was abusive. And, he grew up with his dad slapping his mom around. So he thought that was cool. And well,
it was
the
normal.
First time it happened, I wasn't cool with it. So I jacked him back. And, that just ended up that I ended up getting hurt even worse. And then my dad was involved in it because my dad saw the aftermath of it. So it just was a toxic relationship, right in high school. Like right straight out the gate. And then to get pregnant by this guy. And so you make those decisions based on the information that you have, right?
Right.
And I have to say, you're onto something, because I know, I did choose to terminate the pregnancy, and that was a lot of trauma for me. There was physical trauma involved because I did have a little bit of complications after the fact with bleeding. Just the symbology, the spiritualness of the womb itself, period, is just, and then having to deal with what you were talking about, depression, anxiety, the drinking, things like this. Absolutely. And that was something that came out in my healing journey. There was that theme that came through. Like, I had to learn how to really, truly forgive myself for that. And I don't think folks really understand. It's kind of like me giving people advice about being a parent. I've never been a parent. That's uncharted territory. I've known nothing about it. I really shouldn't have a perspective. And so when you have folks that have not been in that, haven't done it, or haven't been exposed to it, or haven't been in a situation where I have to make a decision that's going to affect the rest of my life, and what that means, you don't know what that's like. So instead of judging folks, it should be that we should be loving and patient and kind and understanding and compassionate, that people make the decisions that they have to make, and it's the information that they have. And so, yeah, after the fact, there's so much, right? We could sit here and say, oh yeah, women should have a choice. Okay, fine. But are we supporting them after the choice? When they make the choice, and they're, there's times I could have literally destroyed my life had I not pulled myself back, had I not pulled myself out of the pit. What about the women that haven't been able to pull themselves out of the pit? Why aren't we talking about that? But yet we're talking about all this. Yeah, we could be here for days. I mean,
and it comes back to the truth. People should just know the truth.
That, and what is the truth? The truth is that, I think life is precious. Life is precious, and we're not meant to lead this life of being angry and nasty and trying to be in control of what everyone's doing. If everyone would just take accountability for their own life.
Yes.
That would
I
be
was just thinking the same thing. If we could all just focus
just
on ourselves.
Take accountability for your own life, and do what you want to do, as long as you're not hurting everybody. And it's like, why is all of this? And I tell you, the reason I think that it's in the mainstream, they want us arguing about it so they can pit us against each other. But I think if people would just stop to think, well, why are they pushing why are they pushing the abortion issue? And then you dig deeper and deeper into that, which, my goodness, that's another rabbit hole. Which we can talk about.
So many rabbit holes.
That literally could be a topic for another discussion because it's just that big, right? And, I know some folks that maybe are not deep thinkers and they're like, everything doesn't have to be something about, but when you live in this system that you have folks that are trying to control this system, that's evident. Like, there is a reason for everything. There is no coincidences, folks. There's none, not a one. And so if it's anti-humanity, it's not God.
Exactly. And there are so many things these days that are so anti-humanity.
If it's anti-humanity, if it's anything that has to do with the destruction of humanity, then it is not from the Creator. And look, hey, shit happens. I get it. I don't know. I think I've changed my view of this and I used to not even be able to talk to this. So to talk about the fact that I had an abortion when I was 18 years old on a platform is huge because it was something I never talked about. But I can say that I have been through that experience. I think I have a perspective.
And I think it's important to talk about it because one of the things that I think I read in the books at the time, that's part of the isolation that women end up feeling. They feel so
100%.
alone because the entire world and media is telling them, no, this sets you free. This makes you happy. This is good for you. And nobody wants to say, but it wasn't good for me. It was bad. I used to do some public speaking on the topic, and there was a group of 3 of us that spoke to it. So Kay Zabolski had been violently assaulted at knife point in an alley in the face. She had the baby, and she went through the whole being shunned by neighbors, classmates, parents. But she had the baby. She loved that baby dearly. She ended up finally having to give this little girl up for adoption when she was 18 months old. So she got it from all sides. She was the violent exception. She kept the baby. She had to give the baby up for adoption. And she is against abortion for any reason, apart from saving the life of the mother. And she's experienced it. Shelley spoke from the aspect that she had an abortion when she was, I think, 16, maybe 17. She was seeing her boyfriend behind her parents' back, and they were very against him because he was Mexican. And so, even worse when now she's pregnant with his child. And she spoke from the fact that she didn't want the abortion. And this is so common. And so many women have said abortion is good for men. Because the man molesting his daughter, he can hide his crime. The boyfriend who doesn't want to pay child support, he gets out of it. So her father just pushed and pushed and pushed, and he begged and he pleaded and he cried until she finally gave in. She never wanted that. And, as I said, some women do, but a lot of them don't. A lot of them are being pressured into it. And 100%. So... the happy end of the story was they did get married in the end and they went on to have 5 daughters. So it was a happy ending in that respect. But we spoke to these things, and women need to know when they're going through this that you're not alone.
Yeah. There's just, when we talk about it, this is such an interesting topic to talk about because there is this concept of sacred sexuality, right? And even down to the fact that we live in a culture where some of the things that go on is like, whoa, and it's pushed, right? It's pushed in the music business. It's pushed in Hollywood. It's okay to walk around half naked. And we have an issue with the porn thing going on. Obviously, we have an issue with pedophilia in this country. And I'm probably going to get in trouble for saying that word, but there is an imbalance going on with this whole sacredness around our sexuality. And that is also by the system as well. So it's, gosh, we could even talk about that, have a discussion about sacred.
Each one of these needs to be its own video.
I'm like, oh my God, I've got so many ideas. I'm like, you know what? I think we should have, like, maybe we could have a round table on sacred sexual energy, because they've come for both men and women.
Yes.
On both sides, like it's like, when
it's hard.
It's another rabbit hole.
Right. It's hard being a mother of 7 sons when I see how some of these policies and ideas and isms and so on have really torn men down so much. Okay, there are some terrible men, but you know what? There's some really lousy women too. It's
true story.
It shouldn't be men and women against each other. We're meant to work together and complement each other.
It's so true. And and it's another thing that they divide us by all means necessary. Political affiliation, the color of our skin, our gender,
male and female,
everything, and it's like, I feel like the more that you can know about that information, I think the more that you can know about it, you can connect the dots. You look in history and you can connect the dots on why it is that they've done this. And it's like, you realize it's not a virtue.
No, well, it goes back to Saul Alinsky's playbook.
Yep.
And that's one of the major key components of pushing a society into authoritarianism, is first to divide them.
Yeah.
And I was listening to a podcast about this a couple weeks ago, and they were talking about how in Russia, it worked to divide people by class. Because there were the rich and the poor, and they said that's not going to work in America, because we're a society where if you're poor, you can become rich. We have upward mobility if you want to work for it.
Right.
And so they had to find something else.
Yes.
Okay, let's cause a racial divide. Let's cause the fight between the sexes that most of us aren't interested in.
Right.
I love my husband. I love my sons. Why am I going to go around talking about how awful men are?
Right.
Some of them are, but most of them aren't. They're bad people everywhere.
That whole concept about toxic masculinity, I'm so tired of hearing that stuff too, because that's all on purpose as well. Now, do I think that there's a lot of men out there that need to do healing work? Absolutely. And those are the men that I'd like to support. I don't know. I think it takes a special woman to be able to work with men. I've always worked with men. I was in the Air Force with men. I have brothers. So I've always felt, comfortable, not intimidated around men at all. There's a special group, I think, of females that can do that. They know that dynamic and they can maneuver in it. But I think we just collectively, we just need to step into our healing journeys.
I think more and more people are starting to see that, as you said, there seems to be something
surrender
awakening.
Already, just surrender and understand that, there are people out here that are ready to support. I mean, it's a beautiful thing, and you're absolutely right. We're living in amazing times, but these are the discussions that need to happen, right? And it's not that we're picking on anybody. These are the things that I observe too, where it's just like, what's going on here? And just the way folks, what they type out and what they would you really say that to somebody? I think if we just took a second to say, would I really say this to somebody? I don't think I would. I don't think I would.
Well, what I always point out is, okay, what you just said about me might be true. I might be a moron who can't read. That may be true.
It may be.
Let's go back to what I said. Whether I'm personally a moron or not doesn't impact what I said. Is what I said incorrect? And if so, why? And I know
Yeah.
I'm wasting my time, but I do try and keep
Yeah.
bringing people back to, let's talk about the
Bring it
facts.
back to
Let's
logic.
talk about,
You
is
gotta,
what I said factually wrong? If it is, I'll change my opinion. If you
right.
can show me where I'm
It's
wrong.
bringing, yeah, it's bringing it back to logic. Like, okay, what you're saying might be, not is, but might be, but where? Like the thing is, I don't think if this is what really chaps me is when I share the information because maybe I looked it up or maybe I know it or maybe I researched it and I share it and then I'm told, oh, well, you're crazy and you're this and you're that. And it's like, no, you're just lazy. That's the
Right.
truth. You're lazy. You don't want, it's real simple. You have this in your hand or you have your laptop in front of you. Like,
Well,
look it up. Check it out.
and
I'm not saying believe what I say. I'm saying if you don't
Right.
believe me, go check it out.
I think part of the problem is that a lot of people will go to their source that tells them what they already believe.
Right.
And any
Reinforce
source that says
confirmation
something,
bias.
right, and any source that says something they don't believe, they dismiss as, well, that source is lying to me. And it's like, well, logically, what you need to do is look at 10, 15, 20 different sources, compare what they're saying. You need to think about it and think about what makes the most sense. And why would someone lie about this? I can tell you why someone would lie about this, but why would someone lie the other way? You have to really think about things.
Right.
And as I
Critically.
said, when I did this deep dive on one issue, I found out we are being lied to about things. We're being told a story.
That's amazing because like I look back at my life and I'm like, yeah. And a couple people that I know that have been talking about this politically. One person in specific is her name's she was a hairstylist in Salem, Oregon, and became real renowned now because of her standing up to the BS of what the governor was trying to shut her business down. And I can't remember what her name is.
Was this the one who cut Nancy Pelosi's hair when everybody else was shut down and put out the videos showing that she came in without the mask and got a haircut when nobody else was allowed to?
Maybe that wasn't her. This is another woman. I can't remember her name. She's brunette. She's in the Patriot movement. She moved to Arizona and then now she's moved to Texas. I don't remember what her name is. It's been a minute since I followed her, but and she's talked about it. So I know that would be something to maybe eventually have folks on to talk about. I wouldn't mind talking about things like that because look, it's all about, I don't want to just talk about the good things. Like I know God's great, but we have to talk about the bad things in order to heal and bring that shit out and let's heal.
Right.
And if we can help other women come to the realization and connect the dots that maybe you had depression and anxiety because of this situation, and maybe that's a piece of the healing that you have to peel apart. And I know I did, and it wasn't easy, but if it gets you to a point where you can forgive yourself, then that's less weight you got. That's a less emotional baggage that you got to carry. And I think, most folks that I think that do, they don't want to. I didn't want to. I mean, my mother,
it's hard.
I was terrified that I didn't even tell my parents. They found out after the fact and they were like, why didn't you say anything? And I'm like, I made the decision. I made an adult decision based on where I was at the time, probably out of fear, absolutely out of fear, probably out of fear of, do I really want to be connected to this guy for the rest of my life? I don't know. So I think it's a topic to really talk about, because I know a lot of women are I think a lot of women are deceived by it, and I think a lot of women have had revelations, at least that I can understand,
Yes.
for the last 6 years about it.
And they've been told for 50 years now, your life is going to be ruined if you have a baby when you didn't expect it. And this is something I wish I could remember the name of a show. I was on a show maybe about a year ago where I talked about being pregnant when I was 20. So I wasn't a teenager, although I did have to wait a few days to go get the test to make sure I wasn't a teenager.
Yeah.
So I got pregnant shortly before my 20th birthday. And I've talked about that publicly, that this is the big lie sold to women, and especially teenage girls, that your life is over. Well, in my situation, I can't technically say I had been kicked out of my home, but I was threatened with it so often that I packed up and left when I was 19 or 18, I think. Yeah, 18. I put myself through the second year of college on my own, who would become my first husband, got pregnant. And so I was going back. He was from Ireland. He still is, although he lives in the States now. But he had gone back to Ireland to get back together with his ex-girlfriend. My parents had effectively kicked me out of my home. I was completely on my own, working at putting myself through college. So I was in a very, very bad position to find out I'm pregnant and I have no one. He's gone, they're gone, but I didn't believe in it. And to me, it was just, okay, I can't do it, but this baby is going to live and I'm just going to figure out how. And if I need to put him up for adoption, that's what will happen, if that's what's best for both of us. As it turned out, we did get back together. We went on to have 8 more children. And I finished college while raising a baby. So I think I had about a year left when he was born. Finished college, graduated with my class, went on to teach music lessons, founded a school band, wrote my books. My life isn't over. My life wasn't ruined.
Yeah.
And
you worked it
out.
Women
and girls need to hear this. You can still go to college. Lots of people do it with a baby. Your life isn't over. And that's one of the reasons I used to talk about it, to say you can still have a very good life.
And again, I'm gonna put it on mute. Hello. Come here. He's a trip, this one over here.
Do you have one dog or two?
He's super protective. So if there's a noise, he's on it. He's my little guard dog.
So my husband is here. He probably wants to make dinner.
Perfect. No, it's been a great conversation, Laura.
Yes.
We got to get you back on here. There's so many places we could pivot to. So
go down those rabbit holes. Focus on one or two at a time.
Just real quick, if you could just share your website and where people can find you if they resonated with what you said today. And I think all of your links are on, like if they go to Facebook, I saw all your links there, but I will also put all of your links in the podcast description as well. So
okay,
if you could just let people know that.
Yeah, people can find me at lauravosika.com. They can find my podcast at booksandbrews.net. They can find my sheep and my rabbits. My finger disappears like the Invisible Man. They can find my sheep, my rabbits, my chickens at glenmerrillfarms.wordpress.com. And I also have a blog where I keep a lot of the Scottish history, but I'm also branching out into posting about all our homesteading projects, our planting, the things I'm learning. And that is at bluebellstrilogy.blogspot.com. And of course, all of that is on Facebook, Instagram, all over.
Yeah, all your links are connected there. So I will make sure that I put everything in the podcast description. Thank you so much for joining me today, Laura. It's been a pleasure. We've kind of went in different areas and it was amazing, and it just shows that there's lots of topics that we can talk about in the future. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom, and
thank you.
I appreciate it. So until I talk to you next time, keep harnessing the shift. And hey, everybody, that's a wrap. Well, that's a wrap.
Thank you to our guest today. And if you would like to learn more about their work, all their links will be located in the podcast description. A quick shout out to our sponsor, LifeWave. I am a brand partner. These patches support energy, recovery, and overall wellness. And you can find out more about them under the central link in my bio, the Hoobie link, hoo.b/harness the shift with Jay. All my offerings, including my coaching program when it's released, plus my contact information and social media links are also available there, as well as in the podcast description. Thanks again for listening. I am Jay. I'll see you next episode on Harness the Shift.